China's foreign minister on Tuesday said the United States had a distorted attitude towards China, and unless it changed its ways, conflict and confrontation will follow. The blunt comments came at a news conference on the sidelines of an annual parliament meeting in Beijing.
If the United States does not hit the brakes but continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing or a crash, and there will surely be conflict and confrontation.
The United States' perception and views of China are seriously distorted. They regard China as the primary rival and the most consequential geopolitical challenge. This is like the first button in the shirt being put wrong, and this leads to a complete deviation from rational and healthy policy towards China. If the United States does not hit the brakes but continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing or a crash, and there will surely be conflict and confrontation.
Tensions between the two superpowers have escalated over a number of issues including Taiwan, trade, and more recently the war in Ukraine. But they worsened last month after the United States shot down a balloon off the U.S. East Coast that it says was a Chinese spying craft. During the nearly 2-hour news conference Tuesday, Foreign Minister Chen Gong reiterated China's position on Taiwan, saying it's a red line that cannot be crossed, and also blamed what he called an invisible hand for the escalation of the war in Ukraine, without specifying who he was referring to, though Russia later said it was the United States.
Regrettably, efforts to persuade peace and promote talks have been consistently undermined. It seems that there is an invisible hand pushing for the protraction and escalation of the conflict, using the Ukrainian crisis to serve certain geopolitical agendas. Asia, our Asia-Pacific region, should become an arena for win-win cooperation and not a chessboard for geopolitics. No Cold War should be allowed to be repeated in Asia. The Ukraine crisis should not be repeated in Asia.
China has declined to condemn Russia's invasion and has fiercely defended its stance on the war, despite Western criticism of its failure to single Russia out as the aggressor. China has also vehemently denied U.S. accusations that it has been considering supplying Russia with weapons. For its part, the U.S. says it favors establishing guardrails for relations with China and is not seeking conflict.
Foreign Minister Chen Gong's statements seemed sort of abrasive and combative. Could look back to the recent hearing that was held by the new House Committee on China, and that rhetoric was very similar, if not even more abrasive in terms of the accusations which were being made. And again, that creates this sort of climate of acrimony in which it's very, very hard for either side to sort of say, hey, actually, we have some mutual interests here. Let's try and work on those. As I was thinking about this interview this afternoon, was almost going back to Reagan's position when it came to thinking about arms control discussions with the Soviets. You know, and Reagan was a Cold Warrior and not a friend of the Soviets at all, but he talked about trust and verify. In other words, he wasn't giving the Soviets a pass on anything which had occurred in their country. But at the same time, he wasn't sort of trying to egg on or sort of cheer for conflict or overemphasize it. And so maybe, it's odd, I'm an Ivy League professor, don't really think of myself as a particular friend of, of Ronald Reagan. But on the other hand, going back to that sort of maybe more rational and nuanced approach to foreign policy, I think would be beneficial to both China and the United States. And this is a call for both China's leaders. Yeah, so I think in terms of historical legacy, Xi likes to think of himself in the league of the other really prominent leaders of the People's Republic of China since 1949. And so that would be Mao, and that would be Deng Xiaoping, and I think he sees himself as somehow different than his predecessors, Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin, who didn't oversee or weren't in charge of real steps forwards in terms of the project of national unification as they see it. And in that regard, Taiwan is the one big outstanding issue that she could turn to and say, look, we've become a global power and we've completed the project of national unification. I'm actually the greatest leader of modern China, bar none, even surpassing Mao. And it does seem like he has those sort of aspirations to really become China's greatest leader, not just one of the greatest. If anything, I feel that a lot of the problems in the relationship right now can be traced back to, for example, 2019 and the Hong Kong protest, when America really didn't say much of anything as the Chinese leadership, in concert with the leadership of the Hong Kong Special Autonomous Region, cracked down on those protests, kind of giving them a green light, and that sort of, I think, really set things back and maybe signaled to the Chinese, hey, you can do what you want to do. And of course, in the political climate in DC, people say, oh, but then we can go back to like the Obama administration's failure to act on certain things. And there's always a chicken and egg quality to this. But I really do think that that was a pretty seminal moment, not only in Chinese domestic politics, but also in its kind of assessment of what America was willing to do worldwide. And we've been trying, I think, since then to sort of play catch up.